So there we have certain literary movements and theories based on classicism, neoclassicism, and romanticism. First of all, we shall see what is classicism. So, historically, what classical antiquity or classical era refers to the long period of cultural history centered on the Mediterranean Sea, comprising the interlocking civilization of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and that is collectively known as the Greco Roman world. So, that is the period in which Greek and Roman society flourished and wielded great influence throughout Europe and the Middle East. So it is conventionally taken to begin with the earliest recorded Greek poetry of Homer, that is 8th to 7th century BC, and continues through the emergence of Christianity and the decline of the Roman Empire, that is in the 5th century AD. Okay, it's end with the dissolution of classical culture and at the close of the late antiquity, that is AD 300 to 600, and again blending into the early middle ages, that is AD 600 to 1000 AD. So such a wide sampling of history and territory covers many disparate cultures and periods. So classical antiquity may refer also an idealized vision maybe among late people of what was. There is a particular word by Edgar Allan Poe. He says the glory that was Greece, the grandeur that was Rome. So that is all about classicism. So classicism refers actually to a style of writing that consciously emulates the forms and subject matter of classical antiquity. That is what we have said, those with the words of Edgar Allan Poe, the glory that was Greece, the grandeur that was Rome. So there is a particular definition which is given by Oxford Dictionary, defined classicism, that is the flowing ancient Greco-Roman principles and styles in art and literature, generally associated with harmony, restraint, and adherence to recognized standards of form and craftsmanship. Okay, so to put it very simply, in other words, the term refers generally to a higher regard for a classical period, that of classical antiquity in the Western tradition, as a setting standard for taste which the classicist seeks to emulate. And for the purpose of Western literature, this means Greek and Roman, actually drama, poetic forms like the epic, the literary theory as expounded in Aristotle's Poetics. So we have seen all these things already. So classicism developed during the Renaissance and Enlightenment eras and continued to shape literature into the 20th century. So, again, even long before the terms literary theory and criticism came into use in the Western literary world, the foundation were laid in the 5th and 4th centuries BC in Greece. So, in fact, the earliest work of literary theory is considered to be Aristotle's Poetics. We know that, wherein he offers his famous definition of tragedy. And Plato, Aristotle, we have seen again, and Greece and Horace and Longinus in Rome form the core of classical criticism in ancient times. So it should, however, to be remembered that the Greeks influenced the Romans. It's obvious from the works of Seneca, Virgil, the later 20th century Greco-Roman models used by writers of the French and German courtly romances. So we shall see what is classical age. So classical age, classicism or a classical age is a body of doctrine thought to be derived from or to reflect the qualities of ancient Greek and Roman culture. Again, the term refers to the admiration and imitation of Greek and Roman literature, Greek and Roman art, and architecture. So, this again refers to the styles, rules, conventions, and modes of the classical authors and the influence on the works of later authors. So, there is a particular work which is written by Harry Blamey. That is in a book called A History of Literary Criticism. He observes that literary theories launched in the classical age, okay, literary theories that is launched in the classical age have quite remarkably kept a grip on people's minds, so much so that in the 17th and 18th centuries, writers were hotly debating how far the authority of the ancients ought to determine literary practice. So the readers who tries to take an overview of the literary criticism of the centuries cannot but repeatedly get impression that from the days of Aristotle it is all of a piece. Okay, classicism, of course, have thus kept alive in the sense of continuity of tradition. However, had a note the ancient produced a literature capable of withstanding scrutiny of the centuries. So the continuity could not have been sustained as it was. So classicism, that was in the middle of the 18th century Europe, began to move toward a new style in architecture, literature, and the arts, as we have said, generally known as classicism, which sought to emulate the ideals of classical antiquity, especially those of classical Greece and Rome. So the new style was also a cleaner style, one that favored clear divisions between parts, brighter contrast and colors, and simplicity rather than complexity. So here in the classical period, so we shall see a kind of characteristics nodes on a classical period. So classical literary criticism, we shall have to start it from the ancient Greek society, the Greek art of imaginative creation. There are a couple of concepts that are very different from our present day ideas. So classical literary criticism simply defined as the classical ideas and imaginary by some classical thinkers. There is some way of very important writers we have seen them like Aristotle, Plato. So classical is something that defines as being in accordance with ancient Greek and Roman modern literature or art or architecture with latest systems and standards based on them. Okay, particularly with reference to balance. So this we have to very much kept in mind, it's particular reference to balance. The second one is regularity and the simpleness of art. So it is in the 8th to 4th century BC. Right? 8th to 4th century BC, a period yet to be parallel in the history of human civilization. And for its brilliance in literature, philosophy, and the visual arts, it's normally known as the classical age. And in the classicism, reason prevails in all provenance of thought. Reason. So, as we have seen the works of Aristotle, its poetics, and Plato's, so the universe is capable of rational explanation as orderly, purposive, structured, and regular. So, brief in reality, leaving little of validity to emotions. So, there is no validity to emotions, a little. So, no validity for emotion. Mystery and miracle are dispelled actually. So uniform excellence, desired in morality is the social function and art. So what is something that the artist who sought to appeal with the classicism is a good taste for the species, not the individual as such, and for seeking what is common to all, general, not particular. So for revealing the order, it's only objective, not subjective ideas. So for revealing the order and the form inherent in a work of art, to thinking people for a good taste. So in classical literary criticism, the classics are works of fiction that of like Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Thomas Hardy, that are relevant to all ages, through all times. So classics are books that have stood the test of time for their relevance, their universal appeal, the simplicity, regularity of form and sense of beauty and balance. So long before the term literary criticism came into practice, literary theory existed as far back as 4th century BC. So classics, we need to analyze this. So classic work, how we regard. So we have just said that what kind of a work we put in with classics, classics books of, so that this have stood the test of time for the relevance. So a classic work of high authority, it could mean a literary work belonging to ancient Greek or a Roman, or a writer or his or her work that is of such high quality merit that is acknowledged as again as excellent. So that is acknowledged as excellent. So that is what we regard as classic. So the influence of classicism was strong in France in the 17th and 18th century. So but its influence was also very felt very strongly in England at that time. So whenever French culture that demanded regaining of classicism, classical works into literature. So this is again an attitude to literature that is guided by admiration of the qualities of formal balance. We need to know that a proportion, a decorum, and restraint attributed to the major works of ancient Greek and Roman literature. Again, so in the Renaissance period, the first major revival of classicism happened. So this is with Cosimo de' Medici gathered a circle of humanists who collected, studied, expounded, and imitated the classics. So the Greek and Roman orders of architecture were also revived during the Renaissance period and applied to ecclesiastical design. So this is how a classicism, a regaining of revival of classicism happened with the French culture and the classical works. So if it needs to analyze the classical works, so a classical work of the highest class, so we need to analyze that. So there are classical works like Plato's Republic, we have seen it, Aristotle's Poetics, Rhetoric, Horace's Ars Poetica, and Longinus on the Sublime. So Roman dramatist Seneca imitated the Greek tragedies, and Virgil was influenced by Homer. Aristotle had influenced the 16th and 17th century literature, and German Goethe and Schiller influenced on the 18th century. So how the revival of classicism again happened to Europe. So that is what we need to analyze then again. Okay, in the 17th century, French writers were the first to align with the classical standards as part of organized literary movement. Okay, it's an appreciation for the ideals of antiquity began when classical translation first became widely available during the Renaissance period. So we know that in the Renaissance French period, writers they were very much long to get the classical regarding of the work. So there are lot many translations of the classical works of these people. So the classical masters, dramatic works modeled on classical Greek masters like Achilles, Sophocles, and Aristotle's three unities they are sought to embody again. So these are called for literary works to have a single plot line, single location, and a compressed time span. So we know the unities of Aristotle. Okay, so literary criticism expanded from drama into poetry during the Enlightenment period when it became known as Neoclassical period. So the prose during the 18th century, Augustan age of English literature. So the classical drama, so there are in French there is a revival of classicism happened. So French classicists showcased their ideals among exclusively in drama first. There is one person whose dramatist Pierre Corneille, the father of French classical tragedy. He adapted Euripides in his early play Medea. So Corneille's masterpiece L'Aeneid broke with strict adherence to three unities, yet developed a dramatic form to encompass the demands of both classical tragedy and comedy. So other French classicists, Jean Racine, so there is one of his works like Andromaque. So that is expanded upon Trojan and there is another writer who's Jean Mouret, who displayed mastery of classical comedy on Tuft and Les Misanthropes. In the 20th century, we have Aaron T.S. Eliot, who embraced literary classicism in his dramatic works. So there is one of his play, which is known as the only play of T.S. Eliot, which is Family Reunion, which is incorporate the structure and subject matter of Achilles, Austria's Wild Cocktail Party of another of his does the same with Euripides' work. And while we have to deal with the poetry of the classical works, the Italian poet we needed to go with, which is Dante, who is an outlier in the development of literary classicism. Because of his epic poem, which is known as Divine Comedy, we know that particular work very much. Okay, appeared independently of any organized movement. So there is a three-part work of Dante, in which Dante consciously drew inspiration from classical epic poetry. Okay, were that of Aeneid. English poet Alexander Pope again adopted classical techniques during the Augustan age, the period of English art that celebrated ancient Rome. So there is again work by Pope's Dunciad and the Rape of Lock use the format of epic poetry, yet a parody the tone and the known as the mock heroics also. So there is a particular critic who's known as Robinson Jeffers, in the 20th century American poet. So he updated Euripides, so that of his work, which is Medea, in which he combined the techniques of classical tragedy and epic poetry in works like Coda. So again, when we have to deal with the classicism in a novel, the concept of prose literature that is postdated antiquity. So there is no explicit classical tradition in fiction actually to match those of drama and poetry. Format aside, early novels appeared in an era that held classical literature in high esteem, and novelists consciously adopted actually aspects of classical literature, so such as Aristotle's insist on moral value, Greek dramatists' use of divine intervention, and epic poetry's focus on the hero's journey. And there is one of the examples of that particular period, 17th and 18th century, that of Samuel Richards' novel, which is Pamela. So Pamela, that serves as an extended lesson on the values of middle class morality. So what middle class morality, and that is a novel which presupposes the involvement of God in personal affairs. So there is some other novels which is titled as Robinson Crusoe, Gulliver's Travels, Don Quixote, that center on the hero's journey as model in works by Homer again. So that is on classicism. So classicism, we have Plato, Aristotle in Greece, that they are shaped the core of classical theory, classical literary criticism in ancient period. So it should, however, remember that the Greeks influenced the Romans, as is obvious from the works of Seneca, Virgil, later 20th century with the Greco-Roman model used by writers of the French and German courtly romances. So this is something, the classical literary criticism, both ancient civilization of Greek and Rome. Okay, so this block will concentrate only on Greek critical theory for practical purpose, and also because the Greek civilization that is older than its Roman counterpart. So the later were greatly influenced by the former, which means Rome is greatly influenced by Greek civilization. So in the classical literary criticism, the impact of school of thought is to be felt even today. So the Greeks influenced the Romans so much so that the Roman dramatist Seneca imitated Greek tragedians. Okay, so classical influence was strongest in France and England in the centuries like 17th and 18th century. Okay, 17 So as in the German writers like Kate, Schiller, nammal kandu, towards the end of the 18th century. So in the 20th century, the influence was considerable in French drama, that of in the plays of Sartre among others. Okay. So there is, we have Plato, Aristotle, for whom them we have discussed as the classical writers. So next we shall see what is neoclassicism. Okay, so we know that Renaissance is insisted on going back to classics. In that way, neoclassicism can be seen as an extension of the Renaissance. Okay, from the early 17th century to the mid 18th century, were the early 17th century to the mid 18th century, but they discontinued the over ornamentalization and sophistication in language found in the Renaissance writers. That is something we need to have a contrast with the classical writers and the neoclassical revival. So, unlike Milton and others, they did not believe in creating mythical figures. Sidney once had argued that to create the ideal world was the function of the poets, something that neoclassics did not accept. So what is classicism? We need to know that is neoclassical means neo means new plus classical. So that is the period of enlightenment. We should say that's the age of reason. That's the age of a era of logic. So there we have definitions on neoclassicism. So neoclassicism comprised a return to the classical models, literary styles and values of ancient Greek and Roman authors. So neoclassicism refers to a broad tendency in literature and art enduring from the early 17th century until around 1750. So this is a literary movement of 17th and 18th century that stressed the importance of using Greek and Roman literature as a guide for creation and criticism. So hence there is a paradox of the term new classicism. So that is the oldness. So we have this period 1660 to 1709. So neoclassical, 1798. So neoclassical literature was written between 1660 to 1798. So the time for formality and artificiality. This is also known as the period of enlightenment, and the neoclassical writers tried to imitate actually the style of Roman and Greek. So this is neoclassicism, that is refer to a broad tendency in literature and art enduring from the early 17th century until and around 1798 or 1750. So while the nature of this tendency inevitably varied across different cultures, it was usually marked by a number of common concerns and characteristics. Okay, and most fundamentally, neoclassicism comprised a return toward classical models, classical literary styles, and values of ancient Greek and Roman authors. So, in this, the neoclassicists were, to some extent, they were heirs of the Renaissance humanists, but many of them reacted sharply against what they perceived to be the stylistic excess, superfluous ornamentation. They just reacted against all these things of classical writers and linguistic over sophistication of some Renaissance writers. So they also rejected the lavishness of the Gothic and Baroque styles. So the neoclassical period, which is known as the age of reason and enlightenment. So it is after what the Renaissance. The Renaissance is a period of exploration and expansiveness that came a reaction and the direction of order and restraint, limitations which is needed. All these things. Okay, so this period is called neoclassical because its writers looked back to the ideals and art forms of classical times. Actually, they were emphasizing even more than the Renaissance predecessors, the classical ideals of order and rational control. So they have something more. They have followed with classical ideals. So the classical ideals of order and that of rational control or moderation, which inspired this period also because it's realistically limited aspirations and it's emphasized on the common sense of society rather than the individual imagination. So they were again practiced on the objective view of imaginations, and it could be characterized as rational. Okay, and indeed it's often known as the age of reason. So many major medieval and Renaissance writers like Dante, Ariosto, that of Spencer, Milton, They had peopled their writings with the fantastic mythical beings. So authors, we know, such as Giraldi, he had attempted to justify the genre of romance, okay, and the use of marvelous and unreal elements. There is, we have the authors like Sidney. There are other writers. They had even proposed in an idealized Neoplatonist strain that the poet's task was to create an ideal world superior to world of nature. So the neoclassicists are reacting against this idealist tendency in Renaissance poetics. So there are two concepts central to neoclassical literary theory and practice. So we need that. That is imitation and nature, which were intimately related. In one sense, the notion of imitation, that of the external world and primarily of human action, that was a reaffirmation of the ideals of objectivity and impersonality. So this age and the literature of the age is concerned with nature, that of human nature, supremacy of reason. So unity in the works of all rights. That is the age known as the classical age or neoclassical age. So we have this period three stages. The neoclassical period, we have three stages. Can be divided into three distinct stages. So we know that the first stage is Restoration period. Now second is Augustan period and the age of Johnson. So Restoration period, which is 1660 to 1700. So in that period, the neoclassical restoration period, so this period marks the British king's restoration. So if you remember the history of that particular period, restoration, that is to the throne after a long period of Puritan domination in England. So its symptoms include dominance of French and classical influence on poetry and drama. So restoration literature is something that continued to appeal to heroic ideals of love and honor, particularly on stage in heroic tragedy. So we have the famous writers of neoclassical period were John Dryden, John Milton, Sir William Temple, John Locke. So again we have Samuel Pepys, F. Rabin, Jane Racine, Jean-Baptiste Poquelin or Molay. So there we have the famous composition of the period, All for Love by John Dryden, a prologue and an epilogue by John Dryden again. So next we have the second stage of neoclassical writers, which is the Augustan age, 1700 to 1750. So this age is called Augustan because King George first wanted people to think he was like Augustus Caesar. Okay, so and this period is marked by the imitation of Virgil and Horace literature and English literature. So we have the famous writers like Alexander Pope, Jonathan Swift, Joseph Addison, Francois Mary, and Voltaire. Actually, a famous composition, Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, Rape of Lock by Alexander Pope. So next we have the age of Johnson. That period is 1750 to 1790. So that period marks the transition towards upcoming Romanticism. Through the period is still largely neoclassical. So there much was happening around the world politically, such as both the American and French Revolution on that period. So this time marked a transition in English literature from the structure and formality of the neoclassical writers to emotional, ungoverned writings of romantics. So the famous writers of that period, Samuel Johnson, Edward Gibbon, John Crabbe, Thomas Gray, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. So we have here, we know the two of the concept of central to neoclassical literary theory and practice were imitation and nature, which were intimately related. So one sense the notion of imitation, that of external world, and primarily of human action. Okay, so was a reaffirmation of the ideals. So we have here that of these two aspects of imitation were often identified as by Pope Alexander Pope. So the identification was based largely on the concept of nature. So this complex concept had a number of senses. So it referred to the harmonious and hierarchical order of the universe, including the various social and political hierarchies in one in the world. So in this vast scheme of nature, everything had its proper and appointed place. So the concept also referred to human nature, to what was central, timeless, and universal in human experience. Hence, nature had a deep moral significance, comprehending the modes of action that were permissible and including certain actions as unnatural. So that is, but unnatural is a term often used by Shakespeare, actually, that to describe the murderous and cunning behavior of characters such as Lady Macbeth. Okay, so we have imitation and nature. So these are the concepts central to neoclassical theory. And there is we said this earlier, there is Aristotle notion of probability and unitism. So here we having concluding on what is classicism. So, this is ironically, neoclassicism helped prepare the way for its own demise. How? So, one avenue toward this self transcendence of neoclassicism was to the concept of the sublime. So, we know. So, the first century treaty called On the Sublime by the classical writer Longinus, he had viewed the sublime as a form of emotional transport beyond the rational faculty. um, so there is works which is followed after him, like Kant. So in fact, in England, the contrast between sublimity and correctness had a socio-political resonance. So since sublimity was associated with English subjects like liberty, and that of correctness with both and the absolute French court. So another legacy of neoclassicist was an examination of the notion of taste in terms of conscious of conscience of qualified people. So the notion of conscience prepared by the way of aesthetic orientated toward reader response rather than mere adherence to an abstract body of rules. So neoclassical thinkers emphasize the past as a guide for present. And most neoclassical thinkers and writers believed that humanity remained constant, and it was unlikely that any new discoveries of technologies would be made. Writers aimed to express universal truths rather than unique and imaginative vision. So, the neoclassical era literature brought a sense of decorum and stability to writers. That's true. So, there were rules to be carefully followed, and there was structure to uphold by the neoclassical writers. So that of the neoclassicism is that of a literary principle, according to which the writing and criticism of poetry and drama were to be guided by rules and precedents derived from best ancient Greek and Roman literature. And so this is again a period in development, the emergence of novel, that again falls outside the realm of neoclassicism. There be no acknowledged classical models for the new form. We have Alexander Pope in much wider length to deal with the neoclassical criticism. So next we have the Romanticism, or the Romantic era in British literature. So we have to see what all things are there in Romanticism. So this Romantic criticism, which was came as a response to the neoclassical movement in literature. The lifespan is 1798 to 1832. So it began as a continental or European movement, and So there are things which is influenced for the revival or coming up of romantic criticism in English. So this is the French Revolution that had a great impact on the romantics. So there were more importance given to the individual responsibility and adherence to customs and traditions. So first of all, that we need to see what is romanticism and what is the word romanticism means. So the definition of the term romanticism that has occasioned a good deal of controversy among literary critics actually. So there are many critics who believe that in literary theorizing and imaginative literature, so we come across not one particular romanticism but several romanticism. Okay, so this point of view is very congenitally argued by the critics, like on the there is a there is lot many views which places the great emphasis on individuality and the subjective dimension of human experience. So we need to see that. So romanticism that is referred as a movement in art, literature and music during the 19th century. So romanticism is characterized by five I's, so that of imagination, intuition, idealism, inspiration and individuality. So we have seen this with the works of lyrical preface to lyrical ballads by William Wordsworth. So the word romantic or romance originally referred to the medieval tales of knights written in original Roman language, Latin. So these are the tales often included love stories between a knight and his lady. So that is resulting in the modern meaning of romance. So when talking about the romantic era in literature, we are actually referring to the romantic as a freely imaginative fictions to be different from the earlier era. So the romantic as in the romantic love. Okay, so we need to see, is there any difference between the earlier period, that of age of reason, or the classical or neoclassical period with the romantic era. So in the age of reason, writers stressed reasons and judgment concerned with the universal experience, the value of society as a whole, the value of rules on an age of reason. And romantic era, so the romantic era writers stressed the imagination and emotion, the concern with the particular experience, the values of the individual human being, the value of freedom actually. So there we have certain characteristics of romantic era. So we have seen this already with preface to lyrical ballad. So that of common man and childhood over urban sophistication, emotions over reason, nature over artificial, the individual over society, imagination over logic. So we have five major romantic era poets like William Wordsworth, William Blake, Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and John Keats. So romanticism that is in the 18th and 19th century. So that period which is famous for rich in style, theme, content. So that of natural world, idealism, physical and emotional passions. So individualism that was emphasized in this period. So used nature as a source of inspiration, not human nature but outside nature. So we have here the themes which the poets of that particular period. So power of human mind. So the power of human mind they are emphasized is the imaginative power. So we have the poems, two poems here we have on that particular period, that of Daffodils by William Wordsworth and To a Skylark by Percy Bysshe Shelley. So there is lines which is given here is from the poem Daffodils. When all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. So that is the sight of daffodils. Again, we have another poem by Shelley, whose poem which is To a Skylark. Here we have the lines like, "Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird you never are." Okay, so then there is another theme of that particular romantic affirmation, which is death and decay, which is in the poems of Percy Bysshe Shelley. So which is Mont Blanc, the works and ways of man, the death and birth, all things that move and breathe with toil and sound are bound and die. So again there is another poem by Shelley, which is Ozymandias. And death again, again, a theme with Wordsworth poem that she dwelt among the untrodden ways. So these are the poems you might have come across in your life. So nature is one of the fundamental motives and themes of that of romantic poets. So they were inspired really well by nature. So in nature, all the romantic poets found their initial inspiration. So we have Wordsworth, we have Shelley. So we shall see some of the things of Shelley and Wordsworth. Shelley was an atheist, but Wordsworth was a theist. So atheism. Shelley, he was expelled from the university. Okay, so religion, Christless, godless. One of his books sealed, and but for Wordsworth, he is a theist. So there is a one particular poem by Wordsworth, which is "The world is too much with us." So in that particular poem, he says, "Great God, I would rather a pagan." So he's very much an atheist. So the characteristics of Roman poets. Okay, the characteristics of romantic poets were the importance of nature. So for that, a poet is only at peace when in nature. Frequent use of personification with nature. Nature became emotionally expressive. Emotion is natural. Reason is learned. So there is a shift from faith in reason to faith in senses, feelings and imagination. So there is a dangers of technology. So that is distant for technology and industrialization, which we know that particular period which is marked industrial revolution. So from interest in urban society to interest in rural and natural world. So we have William Wordsworth. So he is the one who helped to launch actually romantic age. So there is his work Prelude, and he has an interest in sympathy for the life and troubles of a common man. He is considered the nature poet, high priest of nature. So we have William Blake, because he was the person who rebelled against traditional poetic forms and techniques of the neoclassical writers. So we have Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, John Keats. So this is we have known with romanticism. So there is a political dimension of romanticism, which arises from the very affirmation of individual worth that romantic poets and critics make from time to time. So it begins with the affirmation of the worth of the common man and leads to the affirmation of the universal brotherhood. So imagination in this view is a mysterious creative faculty of which all arts, including literature, are in a way an expression, and in which in the end determines man's relationship with external reality. So to sum up with all these things, there are they give more importance to individual responsibility than adherence to customs and traditions. So there is a what we have a difference between the earlier classical neoclassical writers with the classical, the romantic writers. So the romantics drew inspiration from the beauty, okay, that they found in nature. So the Bible, the preface to lyrical ballads, is considered as the manifesto of romanticism. So the French Revolution, that gave so much importance to the ordinary man. So during the French Revolution, French monarchy was that was people's rules were established with that. So in literature and literary criticism, that also a similar pattern set in, giving more importance to the common man's language and the life of common man as a theme. So the lives of kings, noblemen, warriors were no longer fit subject for poetry. So the romantics represented the common man's life in literature and brought out the beauty of rustic life through their poetic power and imagination. So romantic also argued for freedom in poetic creation. So it was no longer necessary to follow the masters. The poet had the freedom to choose his own poetic devices. So meters and diction. So we know these are things in preface to lyrical ballads. So diction is a choice of words. So neoclassical rules regarding poetry were open to be flouted in Romanticism. So the Romantics actually believed that poetry made uninteresting and unfamiliar, familiar things interesting and novel by the association of ideas to the ordinary action described in the poem. So they may be believed that this coloring of imagination or association of ideas was possible only if the mind of the poet was in a state of excitement. Okay, and we have, according to Wordsworth, we know the poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions recollected in tranquility. Because Wordsworth believed that poetry should not merely intellectual, he advocated that meter added charm of poetry, and he is a person who disliked almost all poetic devices, including personification, allusion, hyperbole, inversions, etc. And for Wordsworth, poetry was actually an expression of personal emotion. Okay. Okay. So these are some of the persons we have seen. This again, Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe, John Keats, and all these are about what we call as romanticism actually. So there is a regaining of romanticism in the challenge the second half of 19th century by rise of realism and naturalism. Romanticism has in some ways maintained a constant presence in Western literature, and that is providing basis for several schools and movements from we would know that that is pre-Raphaelite symbolism to expressionism and surrealism. So in a broader sense, the term romantic may be applied to the work and works and authors of other periods by implicitly or explicitly with the classical standards. When we say like Shakespeare is more romantic than Ben Jonson, because they regard the structural modes of Greek drama because he explodes freely supernatural elements of folk legend in a different way. So there we have the writers like W.B. Yeats and the writer D.H. Lawrence. They are more romantic than W.H. Auden and E.M. Forster because they assert the absolute primacy of the personal vision. So they are the people, they are rejected common norms of objectivity and they give more importance to the personal feelings. So these are all about classicism, neoclassicism, and romanticism in general. Okay. Thank you.